All right. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to our webinar for the Project Management Community of Practice. You should be seeing us live on Workplace right now in our group. So we're super excited to have you here. It's our monthly webinar series for the month of October. Today's the 24th, and we're going to be talking to Heather from Stony Brook University. She has a wonderful presentation for you guys today. So, what is the community of practice? A project management professionals community of practice. It's for project management professionals inside and outside of the SUNY community. We're looking to create a space where you guys can share best practices, initiate discussions around concepts, and learn more about things that affect project management. We're looking to foster that discussion and sharing through the monthly webinars. We've had about 3 or 4 of them now, a discussion post from moderators and members, different polls, and different training opportunities that can help you in your PM-centered position. So if you haven't met us before in person or online, the 2 moderators that you have for the community of practice are myself, Kris Lynch. All my contact information is there. I'm a program coordinator with the SUNY Center for Professional Development and specializing more in technical programs. And Krista Glassman is here as well. She's a director of the project management office at iTech and an IT project manager. Her contact information is here. All right.
Good morning.
Lovely. All right, so who is our webinar speaker today? Heather McLaughlin. Heather is a senior manager of enterprise project management at Stony Brook University. She's new to the SUNY community, so make sure you give her a big welcome. She's been here about 6 months with us. Her contact information is here, and she'll give herself a little bit of an introduction. She's given a great presentation for us. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and let Heather share. Wonderful.
Thank you. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. I'm Heather McLaughlin. That's correct. I have been here for about 6 months. I have 20 plus years experience in program, project, portfolio management. That's really where I've spent my career. This is my first time in the higher ed. This is my second time in public sector. Most of my career was in private sector. But today I really wanted to spend some time talking about our governance process, how we were able to implement this across the university, get buy-in from senior leadership, and formalize the requests for projects that come in through the university and ensure that the correct projects are being prioritized, funded, and then executed on. So you'll notice in the title that the word governance does not appear. One of the first things that I realized when I got here was governance was a bit of a curse word around Stony Brook. So we changed that to the Prioritization Review Board and really stepped away from a traditional governance with gates and a lot of checkpoints and some of that other stuff. When I first got to the university, they did have a PMO. We are quite small. It did sound to me like there was some structure discussed. There had been some things put in place, but nothing really stuck. And so my goal was to listen and understand the needs of the organization and ensure that we put something in place that was scalable, that was repeatable, and that, of course, had buy-in from the top as well as different aspects of the organization. So today we'll go through some of the steps on how we got there, and I end with a bit of a lessons learned, and hopefully you find that helpful. So I will say if you have any questions, please feel free to stop and ask them. We don't need to wait for the end. So the first thing that we did was, and it seems pretty basic to project managers, is we created the definition of what a project was. Everything was called a project here. Repeatable, operational work was considered a project. slight enhancements to a system was called a project. So everything had a blanket statement of a project. And we really wanted to say that you needed a definitive start and end, and it needed to be unique. So publicizing that and really kind of getting folks to understand what that was helped in the beginning as we started to determine how we were going to put in some governance around the projects that the EPMO was going to work on. The next thing that we wanted to do was to define our role as a support organization. It's one of those things that I feel very strongly about, that we really are here to serve, right? Yes, we standardize and we always need accurate reporting. We need to organize all of the activity and all of that really good stuff that PMs bring to the table. We remove obstacles, right? But at the end of the day, what we are is, a conductor of an orchestra. So you may have seen this previously. It's from 2007. It is really my favorite way to describe our role. And a lot of folks don't always understand what PMs do, right? So they hear that they're getting a PM assigned to a project and they say, that's great, okay, go code this, or go write these requirements, and maybe if we have that skill set and it's that sort of organization, we would. But when you say that we are a conductor and we make sure things happen in time and when they're supposed to, that really gives a very strong picture of what our role is. So just something I use quite frequently. I really feel strongly about it. It's just a great way to discuss what we do. We also got into a lot of what our role was and our responsibilities. And I think the most important point on this slide is servant leadership. So again, it goes back to how we support, and some characteristics of a servant leader are listening and empathy and awareness, persuasion, foresight, stewardship. So I could go on, but this again resonates with what we're trying to do, is move something along in the most efficient and effective way. So by understanding what our team does and why we're there, the next thing we wanted to talk about was our project management framework. So looking at this, you'll see this looks very similar to a PMI framework, but you'll notice that second red circle, that second phase, is commodity and services acquisition. And so basically that is procurement activities, right? Typically not found within the project management framework. The reason why this is here is it's absolutely by design. This university had some issues with folks going and buying software, being told by the support and the sales organizations of those products, this is a turnkey. You don't need any IT support for this. So what would happen was they would purchase a system or a service or something, and they would get down the road and realize that it's not taking something out of the box and just plugging it in. There's always an IT touch or component to it. And then you would get the call, oh, we need the IT resources for this integration, or we need servers, or we need whatever it is, and it wasn't planned for and it wasn't expected. So the goal of this framework was to have your project idea first and go through, that project review board, we call the PRB, and then project initiation, which is really kind of just your kickoff, and then go into any procurement activities, followed by your planning, execution, and closure. We made this model so it would support, 3 methodologies, which are waterfall. That's primarily where Stony Brook at this point sits. We do have some projects that are an iterative model, and ideally we would love to get to an agile. We're actually doing some Kanban stuff with some small enhancements, which is pretty pretty interesting, but definitely off topic. So we wanted a framework that would support all of those methodologies, and this is what we're using. So now the purpose of the Project Review Board, right? We wanted this to be somewhat loose and not too much rigor, because it seemed, as I said, when you had governance and you had a certain amount of structure to it, it wasn't resonating with the university. So there were a couple of things that we really wanted to happen, and the most important thing in this Project Review Board was, I said we needed an absolute yes or no decision. What seemed to be happening were folks were discussing things, and things may not have gotten to a decision or may not have been a clear decision. And if you talk to folks after a discussion, some thought things were approved, others did not, right? So we needed a really clear yes or no. What happens is folks submit a request for a project through our incident management system. And once we receive that, if it's a large enough project, it falls within our criteria for a project, which if you noticed a few slides ago, we did keep pretty loose, right? We didn't have a financial range around there and things like that. We wanted to see what was coming in and what made the most sense and what was instrumental to the university. So a project comes in, and then the PMO works with the folks submitting the request on a project review package. This is a 2-slide overview that is sent to the review board prior to the meeting, and we're going to show an example of that, and then presented. So the person requesting is the person that actually presents to the project review board. I facilitate the meeting, and the Project Review Board consists of the senior vice presidents of the university. So we had some changes, and we have some folks in interim roles right now at Stony Brook. So we did keep it must be senior vice president. So our PRB members have shrunk recently, and I expect them to expand as folks get placed permanently in positions. So what does the information look like that we present to this Project Review Board? We wanted to give some high-level stuff. So I've X'd out costs and different things. The idea here is you would give a business case, the benefits of this opportunity, and then the risks for doing the project or risks for not doing the project, right? We have a high-level duration at that point, and we have a high-level cost. This is the first slide that the folks would present. So in this case, our functional team lead is Maria. She did present this information to the Project Review Board. And the second slide is the return on investment. So I've blocked a lot of this out. Our director of finance here created an amazing template that I would be happy to share with folks. And it's a multi-sheet Excel where you would put in different tabs, the software that, if it's software, but we'll use that as an example, that you're currently using, that would then be turned off, the cost of the new one potentially, the headcount needed, to get a total cost of ownership. It seemed that folks would say, oh, I'd like to buy this system, it's $50K. But when you actually look at it and you do the work, it turns out it could be a $200,000 investment for the university based on headcount, based on servers needed, or if it's cloud, if it's the reoccurring costs, whatever that may be. So this template, and this is actually a screenshot from that last page that kind of comes together for when you're going to get your payback achieved, what, any sort of information. And when we worked with the project review team members, they felt that this was enough information to make a decision. there's a balance between too much information and spending too much time diving too deeply and doing too much planning before it's reviewed, and just providing surface, which isn't enough information. So between these two slides, the feedback has been this is enough to make a decision to move forward and approve or decline the project. One of the things that I provided at the end of the slides, so we had, the first time we had 6 presenters and they each had their 2 slides, was a current portfolio view. So the idea here is these are the 5 projects that are currently in flight. And just because you're approving something today does not mean it starts today. So we had where we are today, and then we provided where those projects could potentially start based on the existing portfolio. One of the things we didn't want was we didn't want folks approving things and then the next PRB switching priorities. We wanted folks to understand when you're saying that this is a go, the idea is the project would start when the resources that were needed would be able to start. And we ensure that on the IT side as well as the functional sides. So if you look at this, you'll see Wolfmart, which is the lowest bar, actually could start right after the project review board should that have been approved. The idea was it was using different developers, it had pretty light IT touch, but it also used different developers than folks currently assigned to projects. And the procurement, it's the procurement system, so the procurement team and the finance team were ready and had bandwidth to start this project. So that could start right away. When you look at some of the other stuff, cashier and kiosks, that wouldn't be able to start until that compliance and technical maintenance project completed. So not only were we giving them what the project was about, what it was going to cost, we were suggesting where certain things could start based on what we knew today. So the outcome for the project review board is a yes or a no on what was presented, right? And really being able to move forward with those decisions. And that we also use this for if there's a change request that is going to one of the projects that had been part of a previous project review board, that would have significant impact to another project. So we had looked at how cashier and kiosks was going to start after that technical maintenance effort ended. If a change request comes in that's going to extend that technical effort and it's going to push cashier and kiosks, yes, the sponsors may approve that, but that's something that we would bring back to the project review board to ensure that they understood the impact to subsequent projects. So the cadence, it's interesting. I was given 1 hour twice a year. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually has been working well with our volume. The first time, as I said, was 6 projects, and it was very tight with only an hour of time. We had everybody timed, we did dry runs, we had provided the material ahead of time. The idea here is that the senior leadership should be making these strategic decisions, but projects are all taking some time. So having one more frequently when you only have a certain size team that could be able to work on it wasn't really going to be efficient. We did say ad hocs could come up should there be some sort of mandate that is coming up that's going to derail some of these things. If there's a change that could impact pipeline activities. So we do have a caveat that there could be an ad hoc should we need it. It turns out to date, we really haven't needed that. Again, we've just started, I've been here 6 months, so we've gone through one. We have the 2 in the pipe for the January timeframe, so this does seem to be working well. we have a decision workflow here, just how we're doing things. One of the feedback that we got when we were going through this process is this shouldn't be a funding decision. The funding should be from the department where it's coming out of. In previous organizations where I worked, we used governance as the funding model, so this was a little bit different. But we, look to make that a checkpoint. We try to do that prior to going to the PRB, but we always ask just in case if it were needed. So I spoke a little bit about the decisions and real transparency on yes or no's, and that really seemed to be something that folks were struggling with. So we, in pretty short order, had created we actually leveraged existing pages from a previous effort, but pages of a website where we were able to put in different statuses. So if you look, it might be a little hard to see, hopefully not too hard. It says in the screenshot, show projects that are, and you can do active, to be evaluated, approved and in pipeline, denied requests, on hold, canceled, and completed. Right now it's highlighting those projects to be evaluated. And that was the first 6 for that project review board. We actually did wind up adding business cases to them, so if you wanted to click on it and get a little bit more information for those. But that was our way of saying, you submitted the request, we're working on it, you can see it very clearly here, and we also added the date of the project review board, so folks know when that's coming up. After the projects had gone through the PRB, every single one of these, we call them cards, moved to either approved and in pipeline, because as we had said, just because it's approved, it's not kicking off today, or denied requests. And this way, they would have a reason why they were denied, and it was extremely transparent. So the idea is active. That first column has our projects that are currently in flight, and you can get a lot more information there about them. This is sort of our central repository and reporting. So you can get your status reports from them. You can get some information. We had those last 3 columns, the on hold, canceled, and completed, were basically to focus on something that had to have been active first. And we just showed some information. So we go on the next slide about some of those other areas. The idea was transparency. Folks could clearly see where things were, and it was very clear. It also was helpful to the project review board because they know where things stand, so they can and have gone into the website to look at the to be evaluated and to see if the projects that their team is telling them about are showing up there yet, which is really helpful. I provided the team with a prioritization matrix that may help them. One of the things that we wanted to avoid were an automatic yes to everything, because the idea is it's still an investment. You're locking in teams to work on something. You really want it to be a yes for the right reasons. So provided this matrix, again, just to give them stuff to think about. Okay, so getting into some of our lessons learned for this process. One thing that became pretty evident quickly was try to get the no before the meeting wherever possible. If there isn't going to be funding, or if this is something that may conflict with something else, ensure that the folks requesting the project have their senior leadership buy-in. One of the folks in the provost area had said, can you contact and our, financial director before all of these go, and just make sure that they're involved and that kind of thing. So we've added some checks prior to that project review board. The idea here is if something may not be a top priority, try to get it off the list wherever you can. Dry runs are fundamental. Again, we had 6 presentations and I was only given an hour. So we had folks down to 6-minute presentations, 2-minute Q&As, because we then needed decisions. The other thing I would recommend is ensure that decisions happen in that meeting. With us, folks were asked, all the presenters were asked to leave the room, and then it was myself and the PRB members while they deliberated and provided me with the answer, and then I communicated out the decisions for each of them. They wanted to have some conversation, not necessarily in front of a large group of people. So, find out what works for your organization. Expect questions outside of the topics. So one of the things that happened was we were getting questions on current projects and different different efforts that were going on within Do It. Even though we're an EPMO, we report up to the IT organization, which is called Do It Department of IT. And ahead of time, I had the AVP of Enterprise Applications in the room, just in case, because I figured there was a lot that I knew, but just in case it was outside of a project. And that turned out to be extremely helpful because he was able to answer certain things that I may not have been. I also ensured that I was well-versed on all of the projects that were currently in flight and was able to speak to them to provide any answers. And then I would say push for more time when you know you need it. The one thing that I had gotten from our CIO was, I got you an hour. She also did a lot of heavy lifting. She spoke to the other PRB members, and really I had very little resistance from them. They were all happy to be there. They all provided valuable feedback. They all participated in the decision making. One thing they all said was, we really felt, even though it was a tight meeting with everybody had a certain amount of time, they felt that it was crammed, which it was. There were 6 presentations in 1 hour. So my advice is, even though I knew it was going to be tight and I had tried for more time, I think in retrospect I would have insisted on it just to give that extra time. So that, in a nutshell, is really our process and what we've been doing at Stony Brook. I will open it up for any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Heather. I'm watching the feed on Workplace and I haven't seen any questions yet. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are looking to ask a question of Heather, please place it in the Facebook, the Workplace feed underneath the live. We'd be happy to relay that to Heather so that she can answer those questions. While we're waiting, Krista, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask Heather?
I do. I have a few. Thank you, Heather. That was very informative. I really like that ROI template and look forward to having you share that. We can get that out among our other PMs and see if they can put it to good use, because I think that they can.
Great.
And I do have a question, and this is regarding early on in your presentation. When you first arrived, you realized from listening and talking to people that everything was categorized as a project at the time.
Yes. Yep.
So can you help us understand, how did you distinguish, how did you help educate how to distinguish projects from operations? Did you have a specific cutoff, say number of hours or number of people impacted or number of teams that were going to be involved in the project? How did you decide and help them move their thinking from all project to project and operations?
So it's still a work in progress, to be quite honest. And
okay.
I did not have criteria for a certain reason. Since I was new to the organization and I wasn't sure the size of the portfolio and then the ongoing projects, I didn't want us to eliminate projects that really should be PMO managed. We have a very small team, but I find sometimes, even if it's a small dollar amount, it's so critical to the business or to other systems that it really should be PMO managed. And I didn't want us to cut certain things out without that review. We do talk about projects that are not PMO managed and can be smaller. This also came up because we started doing resource allocations across the IT organization to understand folks' availability for projects. And again, it's interesting because we are still struggling with folks saying operational activities or projects. So I really say it has to have a unique, it has to be a unique piece of activity, whatever that is, with a start and an end date. And it's a learning process, and getting folks to understand that, it's great when somebody does get it and they'll say, oh, we're in a meeting and they say, oh, that's not a project, that's operational, can't you see? And that's a wonderful acknowledgement that we are starting to get some traction with that. Having things go through the project review board was a little easier because folks were saying, well, this is just a small project, you don't need to bring it up to that level, right? That was the other thing. Folks being able to have that visibility, sometimes isn't exactly what they want. But larger ones really had no problem because they knew they needed that buy-in and they wanted the projects to move forward and they wanted the commitment of the staff for all teams involved. So I'm not sure if I totally answered that. We're still struggling a little bit, but we just try to reinforce a unique piece of work, definitely start and end date, and haven't identified specific criteria yet.
Okay. Well, I think that one of the keys that you mentioned was the acceptance of visibility. If the sponsor or the person bringing the project forward has this as a critical project in their mission statement, and they do want the visibility, by all means, it would make sense to have it go through the discipline and the rigor of your process so that everybody's on board.
Yes, that's exactly it. And then you're also getting a project manager. Right. So all of our projects are going through the project review board. We have provided, our framework and all of our templates, we've made them available campus-wide should folks want to leverage that, some of our best practices. But at the end of the day, they really want somebody else to do that work. So that's also helped with folks really wanting it to go through the project review board.
Well, I also noticed too on your ROI template that it calls out the year after year after year costs to run that product that you've produced as part of your project. And maybe that helps to get people to understand how to distinguish project from operations, because you have the project piece where you're building it, but then you have a delivery section and you need to have some group to deliver it to, and that's your operations people. Yes,
and it also brings up the question of, do you need additional staff to support this long term? And
right.
I'm not always talking about the IT staff. You could be, if this is a project for the finance department, they may need another headcount to be the system admin, right? It asks those questions.
Correct. And those are very important questions when you're considering whether or not your project is truly successful.
Right.
We do have a question from Workplace. Dwayne has asked, what are you using to develop and present the picture of your proposed timelines for your projects? Is this an Excel or a PPM tool or something else?
So I'm actually using PowerPoint has come out with a timeline module that we purchased. It was very inexpensive, and it really helps you create that. I will say it's not as flexible of a Gantt chart to update continually. It's a lot easier to kind of put your information in once, but that's what we're using for this presentation. Yeah.
And I had a question. Do you feel like you've received a lot of pushback when you first implemented this from those people that needed to propose their projects, or do you feel like it was accepted pretty readily?
It's interesting. I thought that's where I was going to get pushback, and I didn't. And I think it was because for three of them were actually three different departments, and folks wanted them presented separately that had already purchased a software. So they had already they needed the integration, they needed they needed to make this a project. So they were very willing to stand up and talk about the need of, moving off the old system. Now you're paying for two. So I'm hoping in the future, I am getting some positive feedback, you have an idea, come to us. Don't purchase and then come to us, right? So we can be more proactive instead of reactive and all of those things. But I haven't had pushback, and I thought I would. I think because they're also seeing the visibility of the projects. Once a project is active, we have status reports. I mean, I can show some of this if that would be helpful, that we share with the organization. They're updated on a monthly basis. There's a lot of different things that the PMO winds up providing that folks are eager for. So because of that, I think we're fortunate that that they're looking for that support.
That's great.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really awesome that you've gotten that. Another thing I wanted to ask you is if somebody was to start, if they didn't have this board available at their university and this is something that they wanted to start to do and they wanted to put into place, what advice would you give them, like in those starting procedures? Like what do you think is the best things that they need to pay attention to? Or
Right. You got to keep it simple, right? It can't be too onerous for folks, or they're just not going to do it. And I think just listening, because the minute folks heard governance here, they shut down. And I just, by observing certain things, I realized that early on. And the minute I changed the name to Project Review Board, people jumped on board, and it wasn't a fight. So I think knowing those pain points for folks and trying to understand them and then avoid them where you can. I mean, sometimes you can't, right? And it's something that needs to happen and should happen. But if you have an opportunity to call something else, or, just make things a little easier for folks, you're going to have an easier time getting some buy-in.
very good advice. All right, yeah, let's see your templates. I'd love to. We've got plenty of time, so.
Okay, good. So, so what we do is, and I apologize because since I have edit rights, I've got some ugly stuff on my screen that most people don't see. But what we did for all of our projects are, and this is open campus-wide, you can view the project. Again, this isn't a PPM tool. This is us kind of putting stuff here. So we have a timeline page. We have a repository, which once opened reflects all of our folders, reflect our framework, right? So, and then if you go in, you'll see that they all have, certain things in them that you would expect. We have monthly status reports, and I think that's really where folks were very excited to be able to just go get them at any time they wanted. So if they had a meeting with their boss and they needed something to show for where things were, it covers a lot of information. It's pretty standard stuff, but we talk about what it is. We have milestones. This really is the most important part, which is the planned activities. So what we plan to do in the last month, what we plan to do but not accomplish, right? So in this middle section, if you continue to have stuff here, you're late, right? Like that's just kind of a good indicator. And then what you plan to do the following month. We have an issues and a risks log, you know, so pretty basic stuff. But then what we did, so that's for all of the active projects. We gave folks, so we talk about our you know, some of the stuff was in my presentation. We gave folks templates for each of the areas. So in initiation, you would have the PRB, you would have the ROI for it, and another thing that we actually started doing was folks were familiar with charters here. That was the one document that everybody agreed that was needed. So it was interesting. We would go through the PRB, and then we would create the charter, which a lot of it was very similar information, and then we would try to get that signed, and folks would say, but it was already approved at the PRB. So what we're trying this next round, which I think is going to work better, is the charter is going to be included with the PRB materials when it's sent out, and then as long as that information aligns, which we would ensure that it does, that would be considered approved at the PRB, and we wouldn't be looking for another signature. And then we've got, you know, under, this is basically the procurement stuff. We have requirements for project scoping. We've got the business requirements that may come in a little differently. And then we've got the RFP technology template and the IT clauses. So we didn't duplicate everything that procurement is going to provide and support, because there's really no reason for that. But if they need some stuff, they've got that here. Our planning, we've got a communication plan, we've got the requirements. The requirements are the things that do get signed off on. These requirements, the ones done in planning. The idea is if you don't have a procurement aspect to your project, or in the case of some of the stuff that just went to the Project Review Board where procurement happened before that, then you really only need these requirements in planning and would look to get those signed off. We have the timeline template, and this is the one that we have the one question for. I'll just open this. Are you still seeing my screen, or did you stop seeing it? Are you seeing the timeline template?
We are seeing your your internet. We're seeing your browser, so you might want to reshare.
Okay, so, and this is, again, out of PowerPoint. It's the Office timeline tool. And we have our phases, and then we have our milestones. The arrows are the same color as whatever phase they fall into. And that actually came about because a lot of the projects had, as I said, that second phase, that commodity was happening first, and then other stuff. So we just kind of kept them all color-coded so it would be easy for folks to see. Go back to, okay. So then we've got a use case template if folks find it easier for use cases as opposed to, you know, requirements. I've worked on projects where you have requirements in Excel, which is a great way to do it because then you could turn that into your test plans. But if you have 3,000 lines, that's not useful. So, so we've given some options there. Not all of these are required. That's the other thing. And then we've got, you know, support plan, test strategy, test cases. We've got project worksheet, change request, those kinds of things. And then we make them all available campus-wide should folks want to use them.
Those are fabulous resources. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any other questions for Heather?
I have one more. It's Krista.
Yeah.
So Heather, early on you said that once you changed it from governance to project review board, people seem to relax
Yes.
a little more. If you can highlight, were there other lessons learned during the buy-in part?
I would say even around our framework and our templates, it was a lot of the same thing. When folks say, "Oh, look at all these templates," and we say, "Well, you know, these are the only ones that we would really want to ensure we had for each phase." We also did a RACI for them, and when they realized that we weren't expecting the developer who's on the project 20% of the time to create 85 artifacts, he relaxed a little bit. We wanted to have this in the same spirit as the organization. So I should say I also went on, I called it my communication tour. Once the website was done, I went to every department in the university and I sat down with them and I showed them the website. I walked them through what we were doing, how we were doing it, why we were doing it. And that started to resonate with people. And they knew we were there and they knew they could come to us for certain things or have questions. So I think a lot of just over communicating and oversharing, right? Our big thing is transparency so that you're always getting an accurate picture of things. I also, you know, I do a lot of the proofing of the status reports before they go out because you just want to make sure that they are clear and factual and not sort of indicating, you know, something may have taken a long time. Like I know folks here talk about the procurement process and how it's lengthy, right? So a lot of times you'll see things like, oh, due to the lengthy procurement process, you know, trying to reframe that conversation to, you know, the procurement process took this amount of time, so we started later than expected, is a different message than your process is taking too long, so now we're late kind of communication.
Right.
We did hear from Judith on the Facebook feed. She says, thank you for this information. It's very helpful for her. So definitely the people watching are finding this very informative and very helpful. So we really appreciate your time, Heather.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. So I will go and share and do our final bit. Just let people know some more information. So. All right. All right. Ooh, went too far. All right. So a couple pieces of information for everybody. Our upcoming monthly webinars, due to the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and where the fourth Thursday falls in those months, we're not actually going to be having webinars. So we're going to resume our webinars on January 23rd in 2020. It'll be at 11 a.m. We'll be live here on Workplace as well as we are now. So just keep that in mind, with a little bit of a break for a couple months, but then we'll be back in the January timeframe for the spring 2020 semester. So some training opportunities and different things that are coming up. If you haven't heard yet, the SUNY CPD and SUNY Cortland are sponsoring a COA regional forum here at the SUNY CPD in East Syracuse, New York. It's on project management. We're going to be discussing project management tools and all the different ones out there. Why, if you're not using a specific project management tool, something designed for project management versus Excel, you might want to, what benefits it could give you, what are the pitfalls, that sort of stuff. Krista will be presenting for us here. And we also have Varya from SUNY Cortland. She's another active member of our community. So that's going to be Friday, November 15th. It's the Friday after Wizard. So if you happen to be coming up for Wizard and you can stay an extra night or come up on Friday, we would love to have you. It's going to be running from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. There is no cost to this. This is sponsored by COA. We've been seeing in different listservs going around, the COA listservs, the CIO listservs, and other things, people asking about different project management tools. So we thought it was very timely that we kind of go and discuss them. We will be doing some demos of different project management tools that are being used without SUNY right now. And they're going to be done by the campuses. So these are people with the boots on the ground, the people that use these tools. They can really give you the information about why they use it, what are the pitfalls, what are the good things, that sort of stuff. If you're interested in registering, there's two different types of registrations. There is an online registration. So if you can't make it in person, we are going to be hosting it through Zoom. And as well, if you can make it in person, we would love to have you. We've got some lunch for you sponsored by COA. So definitely there's a little bit of an incentive to come and visit us. So you can see the link here and we'll also send it out. It's also posted as an event in the project management community of practice on Workplace. So definitely you can RSVP there and then the link is there for you to go and register through our registration system. If you're not coming in person, but you want to do the Zoom or online registration, but you can't make the whole day, don't worry about it. Come when you can. We'll fit you in. We're going to be doing some roundtable discussions and that sort of stuff. We can also relay any questions that you might have, even if you have them post-event. We will be recording the event in sections. So each one of the sections, I think there's 4 or 5 different sections. So it won't be a full 6-hour recording. It'll be in chunks so that you can actually watch them in chunks. We'll be posting those out. So if you are interested, make sure that you register for the online registration. Probably in the next week after that, we'll be sending out those recording links for people to watch so that you can watch it on your own time as well. So, and then last but not least, if you're looking for any training opportunities in project management or anything technical, please contact us here at the SUNY Center for Professional Development. We have different contracts. There's some of the ones listed below. We're also starting to work with Learning Tree. So if you have anything from them you'd like to take, you can give me a call as well. People have given us pretty good prices, better than normal public prices and better than prices you may be able to get through your university. It doesn't hurt to get a quote from us. It's pretty painless for me. It's what I do. So send me an email, give me a call, you contact me with Workplace Chat. I'd be happy to take the time to find the class for you through the different vendors that we have and give you different price quotes so that you can make a decision whether or not it's worthwhile for you to go through our contracts versus something through your university. The other really nice thing about coming through the CPD is you have a couple different options. You can use your CPD points. So if you're a CPD member campus, we do have the ability for you to pay for it through your CPD points versus actually paying for it out of your pocket. Depending on what it is, you may be able to use it with your iTech points. So if you're an iTech member campus, you can do that as well, saving yourself a little bit money. We do take credit cards. So if that's what you guys use, that's great. But we also do take checks from our community colleges, campus checks. And then we also do journal transfers if you're a state-run university. So it gives you a couple different options that you may not have with the vendor. The vendor may only take a credit card or an invoice, but we can do a couple different things for you that can either help lessen the cost of the class or make it a little bit easier for you to get approved through the channels that you may need to. So, okay. Does anybody have any last minute questions for either Heather or myself or Krista? Well, if you are going to be at Wizard next month, Krista and I and Varya will be there. Come and find us, introduce yourself. We'd love to meet you. We can answer any questions. If you have suggestions for us, we would love to hear about it. We're looking at possibly presenting. We've submitted an abstract. So hopefully if we get accepted, you guys can come and visit us there as well. So thank you everybody for joining us. We really appreciate it. If you're watching this live, we really appreciate that. If you're watching it post, that's awesome as well. If you're watching it post, feel free to still put questions in the chat underneath in the comments. We'll be happy to relay those to Heather for you and get you some answers if you have something specific for her or myself or Krista. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. We really appreciate it. And we hope to see you at Wizard if you be there or another possible event. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thanks very much.